Hey everyone, this is Dave. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. Today I wanted to take a look into the Neutron's Archimedes engine and the progress that is being made or is not being made on that front. There's been some speculation online lately over the past few months that Archimedes might be delayed or behind schedule or slow or a disaster or, ahead of schedule or just there's a lot of stuff going on. Personally, what I do think is clear is that it is the milestone I am most looking forward to seeing and most anxious to see is the test fire of that Archimedes engine. And I think it's kind of the most important issue around Neutron right now, perhaps the one that will hold up the project the most. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much for doing that. If you're not, I hope you'll consider doing that by the end of this video. Every subscriber helps out so much. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into Rocket Lab's Archimedes engine. So, first of all, before we dive into the more recent rumors and speculation around the engine, let's take a little bit of a history lesson here. I'm going to take you back to Rocket Lab's 2022 Investor Day when they unveiled a radical redesign for Archimedes and what Peter Beck had to say about this new engine design. Let's take a look. Dave from the future cutting in here. We do have some new news coming out from Rocket Lab as I have been editing this video, getting ready to publish it, so I just wanted to include that. I did already tweet it out previously, but basically, so Rocket Lab had been saying for a while now that they were targeting a static fire of their Archimedes engine by the end of the year, and now on their timeline on the Rocket Lab website for Neutron development, where we get this cool timeline of various progress milestones and when they're planned, we can see that the Archimedes engine hot fire is now pushed back until 2024. So thanks to Austin and Yeti for sharing that information on the Discord, bringing it to my attention. That's much appreciated. And by the way, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I have been posting a lot more there lately, sharing some of my trades and news quickly before I can get a video out. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely appreciate a follow. The link is in the description below. Obviously, pushing back to the 2024 at this point is not a huge time difference because 2024 is coming up very soon, but we don't know when in 2024 it will be happening. And from what I've heard from a lot of people, they're mostly just disappointed in the lack of communication around this issue more than the delay itself. So hopefully we do get some more information on that Q4 earnings call next year, or even maybe we get to see an Archimedes hot fire video dropped and surprise us all next year. That would be amazing. I also just wanted to add thank you to my new channel members. We do have a couple new names added to the list. A couple of you guys did join on that live stream the other day, which was a ton of fun. I hope you're all enjoying this big 20+% jump we had on the news around this big contract, and welcome aboard to the new channel members. Oh, and since this video is coming out a few days later than I expected, I think I better just add Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, whatever you do celebrate, or if you don't celebrate any of these things, just enjoy the few days off work. I hope you have a great time this holiday season. Thanks for following the space industry with me here on Dave G Investing. Now let's continue with what we do know about the Archimedes engine, starting off by going back to that big design update Peter gave us in the Investor Day in 2022.
Probably one of the bigger updates is the Archimedes engine. So one kind of big update, and for all, once again, the rocket geeks in the crowd, they'll look over at that and go, well, that's not a gas generator cycle, what's going on here? So we did change the cycle from being a gas generator cycle into an oxidizer-rich closed cycle. Now, the rationale behind that is that as we started working through all of the concept of operations and did all the power balances of the engine and really got down into the weeds, what we found is that we started to get turbine temperatures that were looking too high. We started having to make a whole bunch of compromises. The power balance was getting a bit ugly, and we just didn't have any margin. Now, oxidizer-rich closed cycles are typically the cycle you use when you want the most amount of performance. That is the go-to for, like, I want every second of ISP. And the reason why I pointed out the ISP at the very beginning is because if you just dial back the ISP and say, no, we don't need 10,000 psi chamber pressure, we only need 1,500, 2,000 psi chamber pressure, we don't need this crazy ISP, then what you end up with is just a super brick engine. Like this thing, the turbine temperatures in this engine are super low. The power balance is just sitting right in the middle. So what that really means is we have a heap of scope to throttle up or throttle down or increase the performance if we ever need to. Yeah, it's the most boring oxidizer-rich closed-cycle engine with the lowest temperatures you ever see and the lowest chamber pressures. But that's exactly what you want for a reusable vehicle that just needs to go over and over and over again.
So as you saw there, Peter did announce a radical redesign of Neutron in 2022, and it seems like that may have been a little bit late in the game in terms of the development timelines for Neutron. You know, redesigning your engine in 2022, planning to get something on the pad for 2024, very tight timelines. Let's take a look at these different engine cycles, just very high level. I don't want to dive too deep into the details to explain, you know, what the difference is and why they might have done this change. Right now, we're on a web page from the Everyday Astronaut, a great YouTuber who you should probably be following if you're not already. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with his work. And I think it's a pretty good explanation of different types of rocket engines. So here, first of all, we have an open cycle rocket engine, just to give you, you know, a very basic high level, my understanding. Basically, the propellant and oxidizers cannot just flow down into the combustion chamber fast enough just from gravity. They have to be pumped in there at high speeds. So how do you power the pump that pumps those fuels into the combustion chamber? Well, in this case, there is a separate gas generator here that powers it. That does its own combustion, burns its own fuels. You can see here the exhaust from that is exiting the engine through a separate valve. So there is some losses because they use some of that energy and lose it for the gas generator. Let's take a quick look at a Merlin engine here, and you can actually see to the side a little separate exhaust. Now, when we look at an oxidizer-rich closed-cycle engine, we can see that this is now being pumped back in to the main combustion chamber. It's supposed to be, at least as far as I'm aware, more efficient because you don't have any losses from that secondary pump, that turbo pump. It is supposed to be a more complicated setup, a little more difficult to achieve, but in the long run, more efficient. At least that's my understanding. I'm sure there's people in the comments who are going to roast me on my lack of rocket engine knowledge, but you know, that's just not my background. So this is a great site to read through if you want to learn about rocket engine cycles, and I'm sure someone down in the comments can provide some more details on Archimedes specifically and the benefits of this. So now that we're all on the same page as to the massive change that Archimedes underwent just in 2022, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some timelines of different rocket engines, see how long they took to, you know, come to maturity, and from development to test fire, what kind of timelines we are looking at. So all the way back in 2012, Elon Musk announced their new Raptor engine for SpaceX, the engine that would power the future Starship we all know and love today. And then 2 years later, in 2014, SpaceX successfully began development, testing of injectors, and a full power test of a full-scale oxygen preburner in 2015. So we're already talking almost 3 years here. Now, by August of 2016, the first integrated Raptor rocket engine manufactured at the SpaceX Hawthorne facility in California was shipped to SpaceX McGregor for development testing. So now we're talking 3-4 years here for a first integrated Raptor rocket engine. Continuing on, obviously they always like to iterate further, and the Raptor 2 is a complete redesign of the Raptor 1 engine. On December of 2021, Elon announced on his his Twitter account that Raptor 2 had started production and it would have over 230 tons of force. Interesting to me is, even with this long development timeline of the Raptor, when I think back to Starship development, it's probably one of the longest lead time items. Like, they were starting Raptor before we really saw any tanks or anything, as far as I can recall. So even with all that work, on their test flight in April of 2023, as you'll probably recall, we did have 3 of those 33 Raptor engines fail by the time the rocket started to lift off from the pad. The mission ended after 4 minutes of flight after climbing to 39 kilometers. The vehicle also experienced multiple engines out during the test flight. So even with all this work on the Raptor all these years, it is a full flow stage combustion engine. They still have had problems with it, although they're making quite good progress. But when you think about it, we're in 2023 now, and Raptor was originally announced all the way back in 2012, 2013 timelines. Now, when you think about Relativity's Terran R rocket versus Neutron, the proposed timeline for Terran R is 2026. The proposed timeline for a Neutron first flight, maybe end of 2024 if we're lucky. Probably more likely, I think, in 2025. But the interesting thing with this is that although we've lately seen some good tests around that second stage tank for Rocket Lab, they filled it up with those cryogenic fuels and basically exploded it to see how much pressure it could handle. That's all good. When it comes to the engines, the Aeon R engine from Relativity does actually appear to be further along than Archimedes from Rocket Lab, even though Relativity is theoretically 2 years behind Rocket Lab in their development process. And the interesting thing from Relativity is we do have a lot of evidence of their progress on Aeon R already. We can see all sorts of test firings and, testing various components online from Relativity. So it's pretty clear from at least all the evidence being shared online that it does look like they are ahead on the engine front. And if you look back at SpaceX with the Raptor, it does seem like they're following a more traditional approach where it's engine first before you're worrying so much about all the tanks, whereas Rocket Lab, we're already testing tanks, but where are the test fires of Archimedes? Interestingly enough, Tim Ellis, the CEO of Relativity, did have some comments about this in a recent podcast I listened to called Pathfinder, and I thought it'd be interesting to listen to. Now, obviously, he's not a Rocket Lab insider. He doesn't have inside information. He just knows the same public information that we do. And although I have disagreed with some of the things Relativity has said and done, I don't think there's any doubt about Tim Ellis being a very smart guy. So let's take a listen to his comments on Rocket Lab's Archimedes engine.
So ANR has been in development for about 3 years now. We have now tested every major component of the engine at 100% power dozens of times. So we've done full thrust chamber tests, we've done full power gas generator cycle tests, all the valves that are in-house developed have been tested, even the turbopumps we've now tested. We now have a full power pack together. So this is really effectively the whole engine minus the chamber. So both turbopumps, gas generator, all of that working in sync, and that is a very sophisticated article. I do think companies that are switching from very, very small engines to very large and doing real serious turbopumps for the first time, even staged combustion engines, that's going to be really, really hard. It's going to be slow, I think.
Now, obviously, you have to read between the lines a little bit there. He doesn't want to come right out and say the name Rocket Lab, but it's pretty obvious who he's referring to. It really can only be Rocket Lab. So yeah, even Tim Ellis kind of coming out and saying that he thinks they're going to have a very hard time changing their engine design this late in the game, and it is traditionally a very difficult type of engine to do. Now, Peter has kind of come back and said, well, yes, the type of engine is very difficult, but that's why we're throttling it way down. We're not pushing it to its limits, and we should have a much easier time than, say, Blue Origin's BE4s or some of these others, like, say, the Raptor, who obviously is shooting for extremely high pressures, extremely high chamber pressures, extremely high performance, whereas Rocket Lab doesn't want to put so much stress on their engines and trying to just scale down. So those are the kind of the two sides of the coin that we're looking at. There was also a thread here on StockTwits with some speculation and discussion about Archimedes. I debated whether or not to show this to you because there's really no proof backing it up, but I figured I could just share it and it could be a discussion point. So let's see what people were saying here. He's asking, is Rocket Lab just being quieter about Archimedes, or are they actually behind the Aeon R engine? He's just wondering for people who understand rocket development better than him. The interesting stuff comes from this guy here, Numero Uno, who was saying that they are very far behind and he knows people that work on Archimedes. He says there will be no hot fire this year, although they have previously said several times they're shooting for a hot fire by the end of this year. So I guess we'll find out that very soon. And they don't even have an engine test cell ready. They've done some ignition testing on a single element injectors that haven't gone well, and that's all they've got. So again, I'm not a rocket engine expert. I'm not too sure what the single element injectors are and all the rest, but he's pretty clearly saying it's not going very well and that they're very far behind. He continues on that they thought they could do it with a small team on a low budget like Rutherford, but big engines require significantly more people, bigger equipment, bigger test sites, and way more money. They took almost a year before they started hiring people with experience. So saying they're just kind of behind the 8 ball on this. He says it'll be another year before they have a good hot fire, 2 years minimum to have something at stage to produce quantity. So realistically, they're not flying for another 3 years, which would put us into 2026, which would be extremely bad for the company if that were true. Asked to back up his information a little more, he did say that he currently works with former Rocket Lab employees and also knows current employees, so he gets to know a lot after a few beers with those guys. He also says that Peter Beck isn't involved in Archimedes very much due to ITAR, which is the U.S. security regulations around weapons technology and not being allowed to transfer any American technology to foreign countries like New Zealand. ITAR, something that has been very much annoying for Rocket Lab for a while now. There's just a few more comments. Billy, if you do watch this video, hi, I know I've seen you around before. And people arguing, saying, yeah, you're just full of it. You're not telling the truth. I don't believe you. Others saying, oh, thanks for letting us know. Now, going back to the Q3 earnings call, the information we did get on Archimedes, wasn't too in-depth. They did share that Archimedes executed a methane LOX combustion test. Now, I don't know personally how big of a hurdle this really is. Obviously, it doesn't look like a full engine firing or anything along those lines. They achieved target pressures and range of flight-like mixture ratios of methane and LOX in Archimedes combustion devices. It says they're also producing full-scale Archimedes hardware and full assemblies for upcoming development and propulsion tests. So that's the information we got from them on the earnings call. A few other items for Rocket Lab, though. They did secure an engine test site at Stennis for Archimedes. This is a NASA facility they will be leasing and able to use without having to rebuild all that expensive infrastructure for testing their engine. So they do at least have these facilities in place, but of course you need the actual engine to do the testing. That is a step in the right direction, but there's still much further to go. So that's the latest information we have right now around Archimedes. Of course, if you've heard anything else, please do let me know down in the comments. So what I will say, in my opinion, is Archimedes is probably behind where I would like them to be right now. Of course, Peter and the team are much better at this sort of thing than I am, so I do have every faith in them and that they will execute. But it is clear that even though Relativity is planning to launch 2 years later than Rocket Lab, their engine is further along. It is clear that Raptor for SpaceX took quite a while to develop, longer than Rocket Lab has given themselves for Archimedes. It does seem like this redesign for Archimedes may have happened a little bit late in the game. Like if they were going to do this, maybe it would have been better to do a little bit sooner. I'm not too sure with the ITAR requirements and Peter's involvement. I do know that like a lot of the New Zealanders who worked on Rutherford can't be working on Archimedes because it's on the American side as opposed to on the New Zealand side, but it is possible to me that Peter Beck does have an exclusion from this. I think you can apply for that sort of thing. It would kind of surprise me if there was such a critical piece of Neutron he wasn't overseeing that closely. And as I said, I do have a lot of faith in Peter, and I just think he is a brilliant engineer who wouldn't leave something like this to chance. So, two sides of the same coin. I do think overall that if Neutron is delayed, it will be most likely due to Archimedes. I do think we're probably not looking at a 2024 launch, even though they say they're still aiming for that. I think it's more likely to be 2025. And even some of the language we've heard, they used to say we're going to try and launch in 2024. Now they kind of say we're going to try and get something on the pad in 2024, which is a bit of a softening in kind of how they're phrasing it. 2025 I would be fine with. If we did fall back to 2026, 2027, like that poster on the StockTwits forum is saying, that would be very bad, I think, for the company. Of course, rocket programs are always infamous for delays, but with a company on a timeline like Rocket Lab is, because the timeline is the cash runway that they're burning to develop Neutron, you don't want massive delays. So all this is to say, I am extremely looking forward to the first hot fire of Archimedes engine. I do think it's the most important thing to look out for at this point. The engine stuff is looking good. They did do that structural test of that second stage tank, which is apparently more difficult than the first stage tanks because it's even thinner. So things are looking good on the tank front, on the structures front. Just Archimedes, I really hope we get some more information on it on that next earnings call. I hope we get to see some engine firing soon. And yeah, maybe it's all rumors. Maybe there's no truth to it, and this person on StockTwits is just kind of saying that. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. But for me, Archimedes is my #1 thing I'll be watching when it comes to Neutron. Until we do get some more information, though, I'm going to continue to trust in Peter Beck, who has not let me down as of yet. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments how you're feeling about the Archimedes development program, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.